Welcome to 1937. In 1936, I talked a lot about rising newcomer company Comics Magazine. Today we're going to talk about not just their title, Funny Pages, but of the fall of Comics Magazine. Now, back at the start of the year, the strip Dickie Duck gets really meta as a giant hand representing the artist painlessly plucks out one of Dickie's ribs and creates a girl duck named Maisie. And this is 3 years before the debut of Daisy Duck, but the same month that Donna Duck, Daisy's prototype, appears in a Donald Duck cartoon. This could be coincidence, or maybe Matt Curzon was paying really close attention to the promotional posters Disney would have already had in theaters. There's another 2-page story featuring the Clock, who is just getting longer treatments for a few issues in Detective Pictures stories. I think it's interesting how fluid the content was at Comics Magazine, that a feature could just move around like that from title to title or be featured in two at the same time. Speaking of two at the same time, Jerry Frost's Sea Scout debuts in Funny Pages number 8 in the same month that Tom Dawson's Sea Scout debuts in Funny Picture Stories number 4. Except for the name, that could easily be the same character, which is weird. The Clock doesn't undergo a name change when he appears in a different title. The only reason that really warrants discussion about this is that both features are the work of Steve Jewson, or maybe that's pronounced Hewson. Steve is the first new creator to be published by Comics Magazine in 1937 and only worked in comic books up until 1940. And we know he worked for the Harry Chesler Art Studio in 1937. I previously talked about how the Chesler Studio either prepared material for or prepared entire issues for Comics Magazine, but I didn't know exactly when that started. This is more evidence that their relationship with Chesler had already begun. The title of Skipper Ham Shanks is shortened to just the Skipper with this issue. Of the creators who bailed on National Allied for Comics Magazine, Matt Curzon, Joe Baresh, and Bill Allison are only getting 4 pages an issue. Ellis Edwards is getting 5, and John Patterson is getting 7. So if they left National thinking they were getting more pages of work, it seems like only the Skipper's prolific John Patterson is really profiting here. It's unclear to me if Will Eisner is still writing The Sapphire Eye of Sekhmet, or if the writing chores have been handed over to his artist, Ken Ernst, now. Only Ken Ernst is mentioned in the text anywhere. Or cited on Comics.org as the writer. Now, in 2 pages of story, it's hard to squeeze in any writing just for the sake of style, so I think it's really hard to say one way or another if Will Eisner still has any involvement. One of, if not the first woman working in comic books is Marjorie McIntyre, who has been working for Comics Magazine since mid-1936, and people might talk about her more if her contribution to comics hadn't been Coco. Issue 11, cover dated June, would be the last issue of Funny Pages from Comics Magazine. It's unclear what happened to Comics Magazine. Maybe they couldn't compete in the New York marketplace and the Chicago sales weren't strong enough. Maybe there just wasn't a big enough audience to support 3 monthly titles and they overextended themselves. Maybe they saw little point in continuing if they were going to be increasingly dependent on the Chesler Studio for product, or maybe someone just made them a really good offer. So sometime in May or June of 1936, they sell the company. The buyer is Ultem Publications. According to Comics.org, Ultem was named for owners I.W. Ullman and Frank Temerson. They were already publishers, but of racy men's magazines based not out of a big city like New York, but in little Mount Morris, Illinois, a village of about 2,000 people, about halfway between Chicago and Iowa. Why Mount Morris? This is only speculation, but Mount Morris College had closed back in 1932, and if they had a printing press, Ullman and Temerson might have bought it up cheap. And it wasn't just Comics Magazine they bought. They bought Chesler Publications, Inc., the Chesler Art Studio, so they would control every aspect of the comic books. They kept Comics Magazine's Chicago and New York offices and added a Cleveland, Ohio office to help with distribution into the Ohio River Valley. They were determined not to have any of the distribution problems plaguing the other publishers. For a month, there is no issue of Funny Pages at all, but then it comes back as issue 1 of volume 2, and it sucks. Remember all those creators who left National for Comics Magazine? They didn't work for Chesler, so they're all gone. The Chesler content was always the weakest content in Comics Magazine. It's also still very racist. The minstrel show humor seems to have all come from Chesler. They don't even have a breakout star like the Clock anymore because George Brenner seems to have retained the rights to the Clock, and George has fled for a new company that we're going to talk about some episodes from now. Now, Funny Pages shouldn't suck, given the future talent it possesses. New hires to the Chesler studio include Fred Guardineer. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Guardineer is just 24, but he's got a fine arts degree from Albany, New York, and was one of the few pulp fiction illustrators recruited into the comic books field. His figures are a little stiff, but the detail work is excellent. His weakness is that he always wants to write his own material, and he's not very good at originality. Next year, he leaves Chesler to go freelance for National, where he's going to create his breakout star character, the magician and Mandrake clone Zatara. Also working for Chesler/Ultem is a new hire, Charles Biro. Biro is 26 and studied art at both the Brooklyn Museum School of Art and the Grand Central School of Art. He was not very good at comic book art just yet, but by 1939, he's going to be amazing, and we will talk about him in the future a lot. Similarly, the very first freelance work of Jack Cole was for Chesler/Ultem in this title. Jack Cole was just 23. His only training was one of those cartooning correspondence courses. Because he's currently more interested in the magazine or newspaper illustrator field, this One Piece is his only published comic book work until 1938. He will become a legend for his stellar run on Plastic Man, but his skills aren't just there yet. So the timing could not have been worse for Ultem. Had they waited until 1939 or 1940 to hire Biro and Cole at the peak of their powers, they might have been a real powerhouse publisher. The best feature, in my opinion, from the new Funny Pages is Craig Fox's Abdallah. Unlike Chesler's 20-something hires, Fox is an experienced illustrator in his 40s. He won't work in comic books long. Indeed, Abdallah is the feature who will do the longest, off and on for over 3 years. The first installment, it's rough and much more cartoony, as if this is what Fox expected comic book material to have to look like. But by the second installment, it looks much better, as if he finally saw what his better peers were doing. It's hard to describe Abdallah, and that's a good thing because it's quite imaginative. Imagine a Byzantine Prince Valiant fighting dragons that take many forms, sometimes actual dinosaurs that are just mistaken for dragons. It is worth checking out. And check for my next episode, which will continue our examination of Comics Magazine, switching to Ultem on Funny Picture Stories. See you then. Bye-bye.